Ooh, you got me just so crazy over you. We love Madonna, we love Madonna, we love Madonna, we love Madonna.
You're listening to MLVC, the Madonna Podcast, your place for all things Madonna Louise Veronica Ciccone.
Life's a ball, so get up on the dance floor. Hey, everybody, it's Liberty.
And hey, everybody, this is Stefan. Thanks for joining us for another episode of MLVC. Today on the show, we have founder and editor of Women in Pop magazine, Paul Mitchell. Paul, welcome to the show.
Woohoo!
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Thrilled to be here. I get to talk about Madonna for ages on end with no one rolling their eyes at me. It's great.
Exactly. Friendly spot.
Yeah.
You're podcasting today from Australia, correct?
I am. I am based in Sydney, Australia, and contrary to the cliche, it's not sunny today. It is pouring with rain and it's quite cold. So I'm huddled by the heater at the moment.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's winter in Australia, right?
It is, yeah.
Is it really, really... I saw a video that it was flooding in Sydney. Is that the case?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Not where I am, thankfully, but a lot of people are not in a good place with floods everywhere.
Just don't get swept away, you know.
Just feel free to drop as many Madonna puns as you'd like, Paul. This is
I'll try.
As a Madonna podcast, we encourage it. So.
All right, well, let's get to it. Paul, the current issue of Women in Pop features Madonna on the cover. Tell us a little bit about Women in Pop and how did this magazine come to be?
Of course. So Women in Pop is a magazine, as you quite rightly pointed out. We also have a podcast and a website, and we started doing live shows as well. And Women in Pop started it started in 2017. And it really came about through my obsessive passion for all things music, and the fact that I've always been particularly attracted by female pop artists. It's always been my go-to music. It's always been something that I've thought is far superior to any other type of music within the industry. And so it came from that initial premise, but it also came out of the fact that female pop artists and female artists in general have always been completely underrepresented and underrated by the media. There has never, ever... Even, I'm going to say today, there has never, ever been a full acceptance or respectful commentary around female pop artists, of which Madonna is the prime example. And I'm a man and I'm writing about female artists, but I've always been a very committed feminist. It's always just been part of my makeup. And even as a very young child, 5 or 6, I can remember being annoyed at the way that the women artists were being portrayed on my TV screen or on the radio, whatever it would be. I was always so frustrated that you might watch the Grammys or the Billboard Awards or whatever it may be, and you would see the women routinely ignored. And these, hoary old white men that just released rock music would get all the accolades, and a woman would be completely ignored. Or you would tune into a TV show, and 95% of it would be men performing, and you get a token woman at the end. Or they would make fun of the women. They would, because it was just the way it was. It was accepted that way, and that always used to really, really peeve me off. It used to frustrate me, as I said, even as a young child. And then that's always stayed with me, that kind of belief that women are just disrespected in the music industry, despite creating some of the best music in music. And also, female artists have driven pop music. They have driven the whole formation of pop music. They drive changes in society far, far more than men have ever done. If you go back to the very beginning of music, there is, and I'm going on a tangent here, I'm sorry, but, you look at the beginning of music has always been, the cliche is, well, pop music and rock music started in the 50s with Elvis Presley and the Beatles and those type of artists, which is a complete fabrication and erasure of women. pop music started in the 20s with artists like Bessie Smith and Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who were women of colour. And, if you look anywhere into the history of people like Bob Dylan and Frank Sinatra and Elvis Presley, they're on the record as saying these women are what encouraged me to pick up a guitar and start music. It was women that started pop music, but that has just been conveniently ignored for a century. And people like Billie Holiday and Nina Simone and all these type of artists were the foundation of pop music as we know it today. And so all that kind of comes into women in pop, and the fact that it's just been ignored. And any article you would read about a female artist would never, ever focus on their actual music. It would be on how pretty they look in a nice dress, what they did on the carpet last week, who they're dating, who they're not dating, who they broke up with, what other female artists are having a cat fight with, all these type of...
how old they are.
How old they are, exactly. It never focused on their music. And again, that's extremely true for Madonna. It was never about their music. And so Women in Pop, to cut a long story short, came out of that entire frustration that I had with the music industry, and wanting in my own small way to give back some kind of, not respect, because that's kind of the wrong word, but to create a publication where women were celebrated for their artistry and not because of the shape of their body or their pretty makeup or that type of thing. And it really just grew from there. And the whole premise was to promote female artists, both up and coming and established artists, looking into the social history of women in music and how bad it's been without trying to be negative, and also giving the women space to tell their story. So, our articles are 3,000 words and, 6 to 10 pages. So we do a deep dive into their career. It's not just a couple of paragraphs on a happy song they wrote recently. And that's where it all came from. And I think for everything, our whole ethos is probably, you could probably tie Madonna to all of it, as into how she's been treated as an artist and how she's been underrated and disrespected for 40 years now.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where it comes from.
And speaking of Madonna and Women in Pop, you have Madonna on the cover of your current issue. This is the second time you featured her on the cover, yes?
It is. So she was on the very first issue, and now she's on this one.
And your current article is titled 40 Years of Provocative Pop. It takes a look back at Madonna's 40 years of music. And I thought looking back at the musical accomplishments of Madonna in the way that you did is really amazing to see, because, as someone who sort of grew up with Madonna and being a part of as she would release new songs and whatnot, it's fun to sort of look back and have an overview in the way that we can right now of Madonna's career, and sort of look back and see how there were these huge shifts in her music and the styles and the impact that she had. What stood out for you the most when looking back on each decade? Because you sort of do a decade by decade look at here's what she did in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, and the current decade. What stood out for you the most with her music?
I think for me, there's a couple of things really that stand out with her when you break it up into decade by decade. I mean, obviously there's, I guess, what you would call the obvious transition in her music, which all artists go through. She started off, with she started with pop music. It was her first album was very much pop, dance pop. There was no major themes to it. It was just really great, feel good, brilliant pop music. And then obviously she progressed through Like a Prayer at the end of the 80s, and Erotica in the 90s, Ray of Light, Confessions, American Life, and into the Madame X period now. So her music has obviously grown and I guess changed structure and what she's singing about, which is fair for all artists. But I think when you look back at her music, the thing that really stands out for me is, and this is quite an interesting one, is that how much she has dictated how pop music now sounds today. And one thing that was really interesting for me is if you look back at some of her music from the 80s or the 90s, I know because I was there, that music was so incredibly different and alien when it first came out. It was like jaw-dropping. I remember when I first heard the Ray of Light album, it was just mind-blowing. I could not comprehend what I was hearing because it was so different. And the Ray of Light song itself, when she does that incredible upper register in the chorus, that was, you know, and I know people around me at the same time, it was like, you know, what the hell is this? This is just boom.
It was bonkers.
It was.
Yeah, it was almost like you would hear it and you didn't understand why she was doing it, and it almost sounded like something was going wrong, you know, where it was like, this isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And you even look at something like Frozen, which is obviously very has a new lease of life now with the TikTok revival. I mean, that was like 6 minutes long, and it was a single, and it went to number one.
Yeah.
Like, you did not have 6-minute songs which were so ethereal and so just strange sounding go to number one. You know, that was not how it worked in pop music. But if you look back at that music now, and I can imagine for even someone who's in their 20s now that was not around for that, it doesn't sound particularly odd. It just sounds like pop music. And I think that's also probably the case for the Erotica album as well. And for things like even earlier, Like a Prayer. And because it was so mind-blowing and groundbreaking at the time, everyone else jumped in on it and started creating music similar to that. The Music album as well is another great example.
Mm-hmm.
I remember hearing Music as well for the very first time, the single. And again, it was like, I at the beginning, I was like, I don't even know if I like this. I don't know what it is. I can't understand
Liberty,
it.
we've had this conversation on the show. Liberty was the same exact way where I think you had said you didn't even like what it sounded like when it came out, Liberty.
Well, to be honest, that's really how I have felt pretty much with every lead single of hers, with the exception of Medellin, but only because it is this element of sort of, this doesn't sound like what I was expecting or what other artists are doing. I mean, I just thinking about Ray of Light specifically for that particular time when I'm looking at the musical landscape, we've got Backstreet Boys and, you know, Britney. These are very sugary pop
Christina.
And she's kind of coming out of left field and as an established pop artist, but I'm going to give you a different path. If this is something that you're interested in, you know, join me.
I think even if you look back even earlier, even Live to Tell in 86, like Live to Tell after Into the Groove, Like a Virgin, Material Girl, Holiday, Live to Tell was this incredibly, she'd had Crazy for You, which is a ballad as well, but Live to Tell is a really, really serious adult high class, very well produced, like all her stuff, ballad. And to come from what was perceived as a teeny bopper artist in 1986, that was a pretty bold move. And even the music video as well, where she's very like a stylized 1930s movie star, was, I guess, pretty groundbreaking in that time because artists did not do that. You did not have Into the Groove and then release this, you know, very adult AOR ballad. But now, of course, pop artists do that all the time. So, I think that's what stood out to me the most, back to your original question, is how she has defined the pop landscape. And you only really get a sense of that when you look back over it, you know, every single year, and how it was so groundbreaking at the time, but now it doesn't stand out at all because everyone is doing it. And I guess it ties back to my original point that I was talking about before, is that I don't think she's given the credit for that. I don't think anyone acknowledges that to the degree that they should. She 100% defined the music or created the landscape of music that we have now. Yeah. And Erotica is also another example of that, which was quite, it was quite confronting when it first came out, but I think it and probably wasn't very popular even among fans at the time, but it now has a whole new respect given to what it did to music now. It influenced so many people.
So because you were coming on the show today, I thought it would sort of be great to have a little bit of a discussion about Madonna and her music. We've sort of already started that. Because you sort of analyzed her music one decade at a time, I thought it'd be fun to sort of like look at her music from each decade and sort of just an overall general feeling. What's your overall impression of Madonna's 80s music? So I know you sort of alluded to like how some of the earlier stuff was a bit more radio friendly, shall we say, and then it sort of started steering into a different landscape. How do you think her 80s music holds up today versus some of her latter stuff?
I think her 80s music is, I grew up in the 80s, so, you're always going to be a little bit biased towards that. And I fully acknowledge that music is a personal thing and some people have whatever affects them personally. But I think her 1980s input, I would argue, is probably the most perfect pop music that is probably we've ever heard within the musical landscape. She did not miss a beat in the 80s, and that was evidenced by the way that her career played out. Again, you don't really see this much anymore, but if you didn't live in it, you probably wouldn't think it was anything special. But everything she released was a cultural phenomenon. It always charted in the upper reaches of the chart. She was everywhere because of her music. And so I think that her 80s stuff is just sublime, genius pop music. She had songs which probably weren't as great as others, but I think you would be, for me anyway, maybe other fans have a different opinion, but I think you'd be very, very hard pressed to find a dud song in her 1980s output. Her albums did not have filler on them, is my belief. I know some fans don't like some of her album tracks, but I've always been a massive fan of things like Pretender and Stay on the Like a Virgin album.
Totally.
Me too, actually.
And I know that doesn't get a lot of traction with some fans. I Know It on the Madonna album is a brilliant track. Physical Action's a brilliant track. So I think her 80s music is just incredible. And yes, it started off a little bit more poppy and, dance happy. And by the end of it, it was, with the Like a Prayer album, I think it was even better because she wasn't fucking around by the end of the 80s. It was like, Madonna's like, I'm going to take you to the dance floor at the beginning of the 80s. And she's like, it's going to be fun. And then all of a sudden it's like this hard 180 the other way where it's just like teenage pregnancy. Dancing in front of burning crosses. It's like, what's happening here? Where have we gone, Madonna? You can totally understand why there was such an upheaval with her and her music, because it was like she came onto the scene thinking, wearing like fun jewelry and lace gloves. And it was like, and then suddenly if you look at this, how is it the same person, Yeah. Yeah, even with the with Like a Prayer, where she went brunette, it was just this entire, as you say, a 360. And what's interesting about Like a Prayer, and perhaps it's just a cultural thing of a different decade as well. If someone today, if Ariana Grande or whoever it may be, got on a hill and danced in front of burning crosses and kissed a black Jesus in church, they would be cancelled, and the outrage would it would not be sustainable. They would be dropped by their record label. All their sponsorships would be dropped. And I know that happened with Pepsi, with Madonna, but Like a Prayer only made her bigger. It only made her more respected. It only made her more massive in every sense of the word. So it's just, in one way, it's a representation of society. There's no internet, but it's also a really strong endorsement of her power. She could do all that, and I don't want to say get away with it because it makes it sound like she's doing something wrong, but she was just able to do that and not be vilified for it, and only became even more successful. And I think the 80s was, by the end of that period, that really was the period where she started to become, I guess, more of a political activist, and people started to realise there was a lot more to her than they originally had suspected. Yeah. Because to them, songs like True Blue and Papa Don't Preach and all that was just lightweight nonsense. But
even though the context of some of the songs were quite, it was heavy, you know. I mean, you could interpret "Live to Tell" one way, but if you think of it from a survivor's perspective, then you know, of course, that changes the feeling of the song and the meaning for fans. And you could think that a lot of her life experiences perhaps informed how she changed as an artist from this, you know, end 80s, and then let's even segue into the 90s, because by that point, I mean, this climax had been reached, and in a way, it's like there's just nothing else. There's just no way she can surprise us anymore. And then, you know, here we go into this, you know, thinking of Madonna as a provocateur and a true musical innovator, at least after, you know, Like a Prayer and even Vogue, you know, looking into the 90s, you know, would you think that it's possible really to separate Madonna from the persona that her, you know, as she's getting, you know, Justify My Love on TV, well, at least in our VHS, in our you know, can we separate this persona from her music, or is it just a compliment to the music or a compliment to the artistry?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, really. I think the 90s did change things, with the beginning of the 90s anyway, in a massive way. And I think Vogue obviously was massive and was a huge hit. And I remember at the beginning of the 90s, people were almost, you'd see in the media, well, she was big in the 80s. The 90s she'll fade away, but obviously she didn't, and she proved quite the opposite. I think it was when we got into the erotica era that there started to be a much bigger persona around her and who she was as an artist, which didn't always do her fair, or wasn't always fair to her. She became seen as an overly sexualized or sexual artist who was purely, you know, taking off her clothes and having sex on stage purely for the sheer devilment of it to provoke us all. And the criticism that's always thrown at Madonna is that she was just seeking attention. She just wanted attention, and she wanted people to look at her. And she's not talented in any way, shape, or form. She's an attention seeker. And I think that erotica period, you could argue, maybe hurt her, because the world wasn't ready for it, and she did become more of not a caricature, but she became much more of a persona. I think there was that element of, there was a persona Madonna, and then there was the artist Madonna, and I think the persona Madonna got far more attention than the artist Madonna. Whereas in the 80s, I think they were much more aligned, and there wasn't this kind of split personality, if you like, and that hurt her for many, many years. She had to endure the flack she got over the erotica album and the sex book for many, many years, and she didn't really recover from that until Ray of Light came out. I would say the 90s was a period where her persona overshadowed everything else. I still think she made incredible music in that time. I don't think anything about her artistry changed, but I think the media just went into overdrive with what they were seeing her doing.
Right. And I mean, that's an interesting point that little pin right there with the word media in it. And so many people will say, well, you know, that the media caused this sort of uproar for her, that people probably would have been fine with it. But I just don't know about that, especially from a woman's perspective, specifically when you mentioned that, you know, they weren't really ready for it. I don't even know if now, just because she's a woman, if people are ready for it. I mean, I still see that there's so much resistance, even against, let's say, women in rap like Cardi B, or, you know, or she's just too much. We don't need to see everything. We don't need to, you know, hear about what area of you is wet or whatever. But it's just this, the thought is that, can women do these things? Are women ever going to be able to own or push, own themselves or push the boundaries of what society tends to, be okay. You're able to use your voice, but not too much. We don't want to see, we just want to look at your body. We don't want you to talk to us about it, or, those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think you are correct there. It is not necessarily a Madonna thing at all. It is a female thing, and even today, what Madonna was doing in the 90s, 92, 93, it would still be an incredibly hard sell today.
Yeah.
Totally.
And you kind of look back and think, how the hell did she get away with it in 92 and 93? Even as I'm thinking about it
it's
now,
a little ballsy to think that she was doing that on on the level at which she was. It wasn't some. If you look at someone like Kim Petras, she just put out that Slut Pop album. You didn't hear anything about that. It didn't wreck the Catholic religion. Popes weren't condemning her and kicking her out of churches and whatnot. But it's like Madonna does the Sex Book, and it was just like she's just slut shamed up and down all over the place, and it's.
And it will. I think it will always haunt her. But as I read through your article, I was really in awe about the course of her career over the 80s and the 90s, the music, of course, also, but the artistry attached to that, where by the end of the 1990s, although Ray of Light was kind of like a, closing the 90s, but in an extremely high point for her, as far as up till that point in her career. I mean, there were new fans, I think, with Ray of Light, new people who were interested in her music, people who actually maybe never paid attention to her before. Even I had a friend who was such a hippie into like Grateful Dead, and was like, what's this? Tell me about, we're in college, and she's like, tell me about this Madonna record. Like, I might have to get that. That is really interesting. Again, just no disappointment up until at least even, through up to the 2000s. And so what's your opinion of this sort of latter day Madonna music, post, let's say, Ray of Light, of, these 2000s, early 2000s up until now?
Yeah, it was interesting with Ray and Light and music in particular, in that that whole period and up to Confessions as well. She became cool again. She really became this uber cool artist, which I don't think she had even in the 80s. And that was partly because, things go in cycles, and by the time the 2000s came around, the people that grew up with Madonna were working in the media. And so they were fans as kids, and they were able to promote her through the media, and she, as a result, she kind of got this cool thing. We saw it happen with the entire 80s. The 80s never seems to die, but the 80s became cool again once the people that had been through it sort of came into adulthood and were able to write about it and talk about it. And that definitely happened with Madonna. She lived in the UK, which at the time was kind of the cool capital of the world. She married who was at the time a cool movie director. She was designing fashion at H&M, which was at the time was a cool place to be. And she really did she had this kind of aura of coolness, to overuse that word, about her.
Yeah.
And she also became much more critically acclaimed. If we just go back to the Ray of Light period, which is always staggering to me, in 1999 was the first time she'd ever won Grammys for her music.
Yeah.
She'd won a couple in the 80s for, I think, long-form music video or one of those bizarre categories, but she had never won a Grammy for her music until 1999. We're talking about Madonna, the biggest artist of all time, and she was completely blanked by music awards, so the Grammys, the big ones anyway. So she started to get and I think she won some for music as well, or was at least nominated. And so she begins to get this kind of whole aura of respectability, and you don't actually hear as much, bad press about her, around her music. But what does change is you get into this whole this whole argument of she's irrelevant now, she's too old. She's not capable of making great music, even though she was. And what was great about the 2000s is that every time people would have that conversation about, she's irrelevant, she can't make music, she would come back with these massive "fuck you," and Hung Up was a great example of just how brilliant she was at music in that period. Is after the American Life fiasco, which was the video at the height of the Iraq War. She had this huge backlash against that, and it happened to other artists as well, that the Chicks and so on, where because they were seen to be anti-war, their music was pulled from radio and pulled from TV, and they were shamed and called all sorts of names and banned from all different types of things. And that was in many ways probably the most serious scandal she'd had, because it actually affected her music sales. In the past, burning in front of a field of burning crosses didn't cause a blip. Even Erotica taking all her clothes off and cavorting around on a highway in the nude, it didn't affect her sales one bit. And so the American Life fiasco, it was a brilliant album, and I think it went to number one in most countries, but it disappeared just as quickly because she was banned.
Yeah.
So you have that whole conversation around in the early 2000s that she's irrelevant. She's even more desperate for attention. She's too old to be a pop star.
Yeah.
She's kissing Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera on TV just for attention. And there was that whole commentary about she was just like this vampire that was trying to suck the lifeblood out of them to remain.
So she stayed young.
Yeah, exactly. And what was brilliant about that period and her music in the 2000s is that it didn't stop her, and she just came out over and over again with this mind-blowingly incredible music. I mean, Hung Up is probably one of her, for me anyway, it's one of the best things she's ever released, and that came at what you could argue was a really, really low point in her career, coming after American Life. And and it was just massive, and it was huge. I think it's one of her biggest, maybe not her biggest selling, but it broke all these type of records for going to number one around the world. And I think she proved in the 2000s, if nothing else, that she could still create incredible pop music, and that sold, and that any kind of commentary about her being old and over the hill was just bullshit, basically.
Yeah.
But I think Hard Candy was probably another rough patch, and I'll be open and honest and say I'm not a massive fan of the Hard Candy album. I think there is some brilliance on it.
You don't love
Justice
Candy
for
Shop?
Candy Shop. Come on.
I do love Candy Shop.
For Candy Shop. I was disappointed she didn't do Candy Shop at Madame X, I gotta say.
Yeah. Although I did listen to it again recently as part of doing all this, and I liked it a lot more than I thought I did. So there's the it's still a great album.
No, and it's like what you said in the article, which I've always said too, is the first time I heard 4 minutes, but then 2, the album at large was, and you said it in the article, there's a Madonna-ness that's missing from that. And it does. Like, to me, it still will forever be a Madonna album that doesn't sound like a Madonna album. It's the least Madonna sounding album out of any of her albums, which is very strange for me, considering she was so entrenched in working on it with Timbaland and Justin and Pharrell. But it's just, I think there's a little too much Justin in it, and that it just doesn't sound like her. Now, I've always wondered if somebody could reproduce that album and take the Pharrell sound or the Timbaland sound away and reproduce that album, if that would still sound less Madonna or if it would be more Madonna, So I don't know if there's somebody out there who could do that for us, but
let's do it. Let's do it ourselves. We've got a brilliant idea.
I'll get started and get my garage band open here.
Yeah. I mean, Madonna's always had this knack for just creating brilliant pop melodies and that whole pop sound, and you can hear it in Hard Candy. There's songs where that core, that foundation is there, but you're right. There's a little bit of Madonna that's been taken out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, She's Not Me is a brilliant track, and there's lots of Madonna in that, but it probably needs something more. I've always been a big fan of Heartbeat on that album. I think that's a brilliant song.
Yeah,
That's a good
Heartbeat
song.
was. I remember when Hard Candy came out, a review I had read was talking about how they didn't hear Madonna, inherently Madonna in the album, but Heartbeat was, they said, the one song where it's like when you hear her say, you know, I feel it in my heartbeat, they're like, that's Madonna. That's probably the most Madonna hook out of that entire album. But I also love Miles Away too. I think the sound of it was a little too not her, and it never sort of like just it wasn't as Madonna as we needed it to be at the time.
No, I agree.
Paul, what type of music would you like to see Madonna foray into in her next studio album? So I know you did respect where she went with the Madam X album and how it was sort of like, this is what she wants to do, and good for her. What do you think would be next for her as a studio album?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to say, really, because you can never. She's probably one artist where you can never predict what she's going to do next. My normal musical preference tends towards sort of electronica and synth and that type of style. So I'd love to see her do something like that. This is a controversial opinion in Madonna circles, but I think MDNA is one of her best albums ever. I think it is a brilliant album, and I will defend it to the death. I think songs like Love Spent and Falling Free and Turn Up the Radio and Give Me All Your Lovin' are just genius pop songs.
My ringtone. It's my I when people hear my ringtone and it's "Give Me All Your Love," I always get these looks like, "Really? That's your ringtone?" And
Oh,
I'm like,
mine's.
I don't know. I don't know why.
Mine is iconic. So that's so funny because it's also like not a that's the Madonna song, not like a prayer or something that a lot of people will recognize. But yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I didn't know that.
No, and Paul, I love MDNA. I thought it was, when I heard "Girl Gone Wild," I was like, yes, thank you.
Yeah, I loved that album.
On the other side of that, my other controversial Madonna opinion is I do not like the Rebel Heart album. I think that's probably one of her worst. So you can come up with pitchforks and flaming crosses for that one.
But now explain why, because I think you talked about this in the article. Why don't you feel Rebel Heart is one of her strong points?
The same reason for Hard Candy, I think Madonna has been completely stripped out of that album. I hear none of that Madonna magic in it. I think it's. I often wonder, which I mentioned in the article, if Rebel Heart is the album she's referring to on that infamous Instagram post on Gaia Theory, where she's talking about how she was not allowed to be an artist. I think she was thrown into a room with a whole bunch of artists and told to create an album that was relevant to contemporary pop music today, and she was allowed zero control over what went on that album. I think there's a beigeness to it. There's a one size fits all feel to it. I don't think there's anything. There's just not Madonna, in my opinion. There are some good songs on it. "Living for Love" is a great track, but overall, I think it's a really disappointing album.
Well, I was just going to say that thinking about how pushed she was into that sort of like, on Heartbreak City, for example, I think I read 8 people as credited as
9 writers.
9. I mean, maybe this is also a little bit of a clue as why on Rebel Heart she really started to become more self-referential in her lyric.
Yeah.
And where it was like, don't you motherfuckers know who I am? Like, I don't need you. But I mean, there are some that are standout, and most of the ones that I love are not what was actually on the album. So,
I always thought that Ghost Town was the most Madonna song she had done in years. Like, it's still one of my favorite tracks from that album, and it didn't get the attention that I felt it deserved. But it's, to me, such a gorgeous song, and was like a spotlight of like, oh, here's Madonna. This is the Madonna we've been missing, And it was like, but it's there. But I think it gets lost around the pomp and circumstance of the rest of that album.
Yeah. I think the argument that goes with Ghost Town is that it's a brilliant song, and if it had been sung by anyone else, it would have been a number one hit
Right.
and sold by the truckloads, or streamed by the truckloads, by the way. But to your original question, I think what I would really love to see her do is not Rebel Heart. I think to go back to what made her so successful at the beginning and so individual and so singular is all of her albums, right up until maybe Hard Candies when it started. She hunkered down with one producer and they did it together.
Yeah.
And they sparked off each other and they created brilliant music, and I would really love to see her do that again. I mean, it's every Madonna fan's fantasy, but I would love her to do a record with Patrick Leonard again. I mean, I think that would be just incredible. And I mean, even doing something with William Orbit again would be great. I mean, I know they did MDNA, and I don't think he liked the experience at all, but I would really love to see her do something like that, get together with one producer and create gold that is uniquely her, and for my own preference to go into electronica and synth and that type of pop. But that would be my Madonna fantasy of what her next album would be.
Yeah, I just say lock her away in a room with one album writer and just knock it out like a prayer style. You know, like 2 weeks, Madonna. Take the kids off to summer camp and just focus for 2 weeks on nothing but an album and just knock it out. You know, like 10 tracks, make it super short and sweet and perfect. And I agree. I'm always give me a Madonna and a synth, you know, and I'm in heaven. So.
Yeah, I mean, I still love the experimental aspect for her to come and say, you know, look, I know what's going on musically right now, but I'm here now. You know, I'm going to set the bar for the next group of musicians or the next people who wish to be pop artists.
Yeah. I mean, Madam X, I know, doesn't get a lot of love with fans, and I'm by no means saying it's her best album, but what I love about it, and, you know, there's no obvious hit singles and all that, but I think that's what makes it so incredible, is that she still proves that at, I mean, whatever, she's now 63, she can still experiment and make stuff that no one else is making in pop music. And that is something to be applauded. It's also why I'm a huge defender of the I'm Breathless album. In 1990, at the height of her pop fame, she releases this crazy 1930s style album, but she does it well. I mean, people argue about this, but she does it so authentically and so well. Both Madam X and I'm Breathless are just evidence of what an incredible musical brain she has and what an incredible musical creator she is. So I will always defend Madam X for that ability she has to just do whatever the fuck she wants and do it well. So I'm all for her continuing to be experimental in that vein. I think it's to be applauded. And the one thing I do not want her to do is to go the other way. And you know, we've seen a little bit with Frozen, for example, where she just gets stuck in this self-referential loop, and she's always said she's never interested in going back and revisiting, you know, her past glories. And I just hope she stays true to that, and we don't have an album of 12 Frozen 1 minute remix.
I can agree.
The worst thing she could do, I think.
Hey, Stefan, I think it's time for my favorite part of the podcast.
All right, well, Paul, it's time for a little segment we like to call the lightning. These answers are just meant to be quick, off the top of your head, wherever you're at in your Madonna journey today. Don't think it too hard.
Okay.
Favorite Madonna song?
I love Till Death Do Us Part from the Like a Prayer album.
Oh.
I think it is incredible. It is incredible.
Yeah, I agree.
Favorite Madonna music video?
Probably Like a Prayer.
Excellent.
Oh, now see, I thought you were going to say Bad Girl because you were saying how much
there's so many. I changed. I completely. Bad Girl, incredible. There are so many, and when I'm on the spot, I can't think. Bad Girl. It is an incredible music video, and it proves that Madonna can act. It proves Madonna can act.
Yes,
absolutely.
Favorite Madonna tour?
I'm a very bad Madonna fan, and I don't go to a lot of her tours. I'm going to put my hand up and say it straight away. But I would say the Reinvention Tour.
Good one. Favorite Madonna movie?
I love Evita. I also have to say I'm a massive fan. I can give two answers. I'm a massive fan of Dangerous Game. I think it's great.
Oh.
Another proof that Madonna can act moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I always think the marijuana scene where she's talking about the tampons or whatever, I was like, that needs to be on Madonna's acting reel whenever she wants to do another movie. That like totally solidifies the fact, yes, she can act.
Yeah, she can.
Favorite Madonna look, and this can be from a video, a tour, a photo shoot.
Oh, there's so many. There is literally so many. I love the album cover for True Blue. It's a beautiful shot. If I had to choose, I love her look in the Hung Up music video. I think it's great.
Oh,
A little Farrah Fawcett wave.
Yeah, and actually, now that I'm seeing it behind you, Liberty, the single cover of the Like a Prayer single. That's up there as well. So I've given you 3. Sorry. It looks incredible in that photo.
Yeah, I love. I was just rewatching something from the Confessions era today, and she just has such a fine look about her face, very almost pixie. She's a beautiful woman no matter what. Absolutely, no matter what.
I'm always in awe that she did that video with every bone in her body broken, basically.
I know.
Right?
I still think about that. I think about that Motorola Razor commercial. I don't know if you saw that.
Iggy, no.
I know. Gosh, but that, I remember. I think even a friend called me like, "Are you okay? Madonna broke a bone." Like, I'm all right. I'm a little, I didn't even know, but thank you for worrying about me in worrying about Madonna. That's a very interesting. It's how she relates. Everybody relates anything that happens to Madonna to me just because by default now I'm thereby associated because of my love for her. Not the worst. It's not the worst thing that could happen to me, I don't think.
Very true.
Well, everyone, thank you so much, Paul. This was a delight. That's our show for today. And I just want to thank you, Paul, for visiting the show, and tell everyone where they can find Women in Pop online and on social.
So you can buy a copy of the magazine at womeninpop.com/subscribe. We still have copies of the latest issue available. And back issues as well. And we are on all social media. Well, sorry, not all. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And our handle is at Women in Pop. And you can find us there. So please follow, subscribe, join, buy. We'd love to have you all on board.
That'd be great.
Because she's incredible.
Well, and for all women, particularly right now, I mean, the climate in the United States, I really think that for women in general, it's important to consider it isn't just how we look or how we sound, or, it matters also what we say. It matters also how we feel, and it matters that we are also artists and also creators. So thank you. We appreciate on behalf of women everywhere. Thank you for coming today and talking to us about this.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And remember, everybody, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at MLVC Podcast. If you want, you can donate to the podcast on Venmo at MLVC Podcast, or consider becoming a subscriber on Patreon, patreon.podbean.com/MLVC Podcast. Paul, thanks so much. Make sure go check out Women in Pop. Do it right now. Paul, thanks again for coming on the show. This was wonderful. It was great to chat with you.
Thank you for having me so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.